I've pushed it.
Okay.
And it's all yours. Go.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you could join us. It looks like we've got a pretty good crowd participating today in the webinar. This session will be on Microsoft Word 365 accessibility, so it will speak specifically to the 365 version. Hold on just a second. I just wanted everybody to put a face to the name, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video for the remainder. All right. So, and actually, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that today is actually an important day in inclusiveness and accessibility. It's Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And this is the 13th annual Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And it's held every third Thursday in May. And the purpose of it is to just get everyone talking and just becoming more aware. And there's a lot of learning opportunities going on today. If you were to go to the address you see here, accessibility.day, D-A-Y, if you went to that, you would see a host of different online events that are going on around the world for that matter. And a lot of them are even they started earlier in the week. They may continue into next week. A bulk of them are today. Yes.
I don't think you're sharing the screen if you wanted to show something.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess it didn't take. Sorry about that. That would be helpful to share, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there you go. You're all set. Thank you.
Am I good? Okay, excellent. Okay. All right. But I had everything on disturb, and of course that wasn't the case. Do not disturb. All right. Sorry about that. Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And here's the address that I mentioned earlier, accessibility.day. And we just happened to be doing our presentation today on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So that worked out really nice. And we were actually talking about doing something every year on this particular day, since we're Missouri Assistive Technology, does presentations and webinars throughout the year. So that'll be kind of a neat addition to the rotation. Okay, so to get to the basics of accessibility, first off, many times when we're outputting our documents to the web, one of the primary formats is PDF. And again, depending upon who your audience is and what your requests are, there are lots of times where we are putting out things as Word documents based on user needs. Some people still find them, easier to deal with or, access depending upon what types of devices they're using. But primarily, you're going to see a bulk of those downloadable documents as PDF. So, and with Word being one of the primary documents that are converted to PDF, an accessible source document is the key to having an accessible PDF document. And so that's kind of where this presentation comes in. And we're going to go through all the components that you need to review whenever you are creating that document, things you need to think about, and then what you can do to check it along the way. So these are some of the key elements and things that you need to think about when you're creating that Word document. And these are the things that we're going to be covering as part of it. And we're going to do this as like it's going to be a demo style webinar where I'm going to have a document that's inaccessible and we're going to get it all the way to accessible and then export it to PDF. So we're going to be covering topics, heading styles, setting the document properties, making link text meaningful, creating lists and creating them properly, labeling images correctly, and a few different examples of how that looks, proper color contrast and color use, and then formatting those data tables properly so that they can be read properly by assistive technology. All right, next we will get into, so this is kind of the outline for the demo. We're going to be preparing our settings in Word that's going to cover making sure the accessibility checker is automatically running, as well as making sure we have some PDF settings set in a certain way. And then we're going to walk through remediating an inaccessible Word document, and then talk about how to properly convert that document to PDF. So on that, I'm going to jump over to our document. And I'll go ahead and kind of jump this bigger to make it easier for people to see. And so the first thing that we're going to talk about is just making sure a few things are set in a certain way to make our work easier as we're setting up our document. So the first thing, we're going to go to File and Info, and then there is a check for issues, and then there's a drop down, and one of them is check accessibility. That creates a little
Lainie?
Yeah.
Can you unshare the PowerPoint and then reselect the Word doc and we can see what you're doing? Yep.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. It's been a while since we did one of these.
Yes, I forgot about that whole toggling between the screens.
There you go.
Awesome. So jumping back, we're going to go under File, Info, check for issues, check accessibility, and that's going to set up on the right side the accessibility checking window. And one of the things that I wanted to take note of is that there's an option called Keep Accessibility Checker Running While I Work. And you want to make sure that this is set. Many times by default, it'll be set. But one of the key indicators that you'll know it's running is you'll see down in the bottom of the word bar, it'll say Accessibility Investigate. There'll be an accessibility indicator down here. You'll know that it's running all the time. If you don't see that, you'll know that you need to, File, Info, check accessibility, make sure that that's running. And as you see here, we've got a few errors to fix. So, and that's kind of all part of our presentation today. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about setting up the PDF output a certain way. So I went to the File menu, and I'm just going to the Save as Adobe PDF. We're not going to save it yet, but we're just going to access the Options menu. And in that Options menu, we want to make sure that we check Convert Document Information. The Create PDFA is not required. It's a higher level conformance that it goes beyond what Section 508 and, WCAG and those general things require. So that is not a required element to have that checked. Enable accessibility and reflow with tagged Adobe PDF, meaning it's going to tag it and give it that structure that it needs. We want to create bookmarks, and we want to convert word headings to bookmarks. And the two underneath, there's like 3 options under create bookmarks. That first one is the one that needs to be set. And then, depending if you want to convert comments, if you have commenting turned on for some reason and it makes sense with the document that you're doing, you'll want to convert comments. So, it's obviously only going to convert them if it detects that commenting has been incorporated. So those are the settings that you want to make sure are set for your PDF. Depending on if you have Adobe Acrobat Professional installed on your machine, you will have an Acrobat option up in your ribbon bar. So not everyone's going to have that option, and then you'll have the file save as Adobe PDF, regardless. So those are just kind of our getting started settings. And again, the accessibility checker is loaded here, and it's giving me some errors that we're going to be working through. And at the end, after we remediate this, I have like I'll jump back to the presentation, and I have a couple slides that talk about what the accessibility checker checks and what it doesn't check. So you get an understanding of what the scope of this is, because there is things that are a little more manual in nature that you need to take note of. So moving on. Now we're going to start. So I have this just little demonstration document set up, and we're going to be stepping through it and fixing a few things. So far we're seeing some errors here: missing object description, missing a table header, image or object not in line, warnings, hard to read text contrast. And you'll notice as you use it, you'll see errors, warnings. A lot of times when things go under warnings, it's things that maybe you need to more manually check. Errors are, hard errors that it has detected and knows. Warnings kind of fall into, these could potentially be an issue. You'll want to kind of review these. So the first thing we want to do, we're going to talk about heading and heading styles and things like that. And kind of while we're on this topic, just good practice is, setting up, using a user-friendly font. Some examples of that are Tahoma, Calibri, Helvetica, and your organization may have some standards on what fonts you're supposed to use in your documents, but otherwise, there's, a few examples of Verdana, Times New Roman. Those are, some other good examples of basic fonts. And we'll be getting into headings and heading styles and talking about how you can adjust those. So typically, you definitely want what we call a heading 1 in the document. Some stuff around. So go over here. And I'm on the Home tab, and there is a section called Styles. And this is where what I'm referring to when I'm talking about assigning headings. So you'll see here, I scroll down and you see like a heading 1, and you'll notice, things will adjust in how they look. And at any time you can adjust how these look, and it will apply to the heading structure you've already set up within the document. So this Missouri Assistive Technology Information and Statistics heading is, a kind of a likely heading 1. It's whatever the main focus is of that document. It could be a form, it could be a manual, it could be a guide, it could be, you know, a letter, you know, grant application information. It could be a wide variety of things that you're setting up. And again, you know, typically you're using Word versus a web page because maybe you need to retain certain formatting. You know, forms are an example. Maybe it's a manual or a guide that you're setting up. It may be downloaded, it may be printed. Those are the kind of things that you would be using, you know, a Word document for. So here we'll notice it's normal. So we don't have our, you know, in this case, we don't have our heading structure here at the top of the page set. And I want to assign this a heading 1. And we'll notice the formatting changed, all of that. And again, you can go in, I'm right clicking on that style and modify. And I can change how that looks. And so I can change the font, I can change sizing, because typically with heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, you know, heading 1's going to be bigger than heading 2, 3, 4, and so on. So it's kind of a hierarchy. So you want to make sure that you use that kind of as your guide. And again, you may have kind of some pre-formats. Your organization may have some pre-formats for some of these, others may not. So it just kind of depends. And then I'm going to go through. So going through the document, okay, when would I need to set up subheadings? Well, are there logical sections to the document? Do you have a topic and then some information underneath it? As I go through this particular document, I've got it set up that way. So service delivery highlights. I'm going to set that as a heading 2. This Missouri State ICT standard, I have some information under that. Not all documents may have subheadings. Minimally, you're going to have something that you can identify as a heading 1. That general, you know, the general information about what's happening in this document and what information it's sharing with you. And we go through, let's see here. Counseling. Let's see. This one looks, you know, it's like a subheading of Missouri State ICT standard. I'm going to give that a heading 3, you know, things like that. And as we go through here, I've actually already went through and set up the remaining kind of headings throughout this. And I was going to mention, let's see here. Yeah, okay. Go back. All right. So we're going through here, and you know, some of the benefits of setting up headings is that you can, you know, especially if it's a longer document, which for the web content accessibility guidelines, you know, and the standards, one of the things that's mentioned, if you have a document that's more than 10 pages, 10 or more pages, it might make sense to incorporate like a table of contents so that they can get a quick snapshot of what's in the document. And if you do that, you can actually, under reference, you can go under table of contents and you can insert one, you know, right into the document. I'm not going to do it here, but you can actually insert it and then just update it. And it'll give you, it'll take all your headings and it'll generate a table of contents for you. And you can place that in the document, you know, towards the top wherever it makes sense. And then as you modify the document, you can update that table of contents and make sure that it's referencing the correct pages. So I'm going to go on to our next thing, and we need to make sure that the document has a proper title, and I'm going to talk to you about what that means. So we go into File, Info, and then over here, we have Document Properties. And there is a section called Title. And this is important because if you post this out on the web, this is the first keywords that will be detected if someone's searching for this document. And so typically your title is going to be replicated from your whatever's identified as a heading 1, or some variation of that. Tags, that is a organizational preference. Tags don't weigh anything pretty much for search engine optimization. The things that weigh whenever something is being searched and brought back on the web is title and the first 100 characters of your document. That's where it's going to pull those search terms from. So tags is completely up to you whether you want to add tags, comments, etc. And then many times an organization might want to remove author information from their documents. And, in that case, you could put instead of my name here, you could put your organization information instead of author. A lot of times that may be an organization policy, Department of Education, Missouri Assistive Technology, school district name, whatever. And that way it kind of gets that more personal information out of there. So title is important. And then we're going to move on to scroll down through our document. Now we're going to talk about lists. Well, what is a list? What is the purposes and how would I format it? So I notice here I've got a couple of items and I have little asterisks in front of them. And I'm going to go back to my home tab. And there's a couple of different formats. There's just a bulleted list and what we call a numbered list. And we'll notice here I highlighted it, and it's not highlighting showing that I'm using these and that I'm using formatting that's already pre-programmed into Word. And again, it's going to make this more accessible when if someone either accesses it as a Word document or accesses it through a PDF document. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click the bulleted. I've highlighted those 2 items. I'm going to click it, and it just automatically, it removed the asterisk. It went, oh, we're going to create a bulleted list. I'm removing those and replacing it with, proper formatting. I have a numbered list down here under this heading. And look here, yeah. I have 3. So when I roll up here, if this had been properly formatted using the listing options, this would have, the numbering would have been highlighted, but it's not. So what we're going to do here is I highlighted this 1, 2, and 3 and kind of indicate this is just, numbers that have just been put in here and they're not formatted in a certain way. And I'm going to hit this numbering, which is under our paragraph section under home. And I'm going to, so now it's formatting it in a way that's going to give it structure, and it's going to create some information about this behind the scenes saying this is a numbered list. I'm going to do a few little adjustments here to it. Now these, I've got a couple of sub bullets under number 3. And we'll notice here, well, that one had been previously formatted. Okay, so we've got that set up. So, what do you use lists for? I think it's a great way to simplify. It kind of falls in that plain language category of web accessibility, where, instead of setting things, typing out long paragraphs of text, if you put it in a bulleted list, it's much easier to consume it and scan it. I think all of us have had those cases, and you see it used on the web a lot to simplify information and to make it very scannable and consumable. So you'll probably, find yourself seeing uses, more uses for it. And again, when would I use it? If there's a reason to number, you would use numbering. If you have, these are the 3 elements of X, or if you're demonstrating steps to a process, that's a good way to use numbering. And then, otherwise you would just use your bulleted. And you again, you can format, you can use your formatting and format these to your liking as far as visually how that goes. Moving on. Now we're going to talk about links and how links should be presented. So we're going back up here, and I have a heading called Missouri State ICT Standard, and we have Missouri ICT Standards, and it's a link to a document, and then the definition of terms that are part of that standard, so you understand it more. What do all the terms mean within the standard? So in this case, we have this long, link, and the text in the document is also the link, and that's not user friendly for someone using assistive technology devices. We have the ability to browse documents in such a way like they just want a shortcut and see all the links within a document. And these are, kind of harder to process, and you may not necessarily know what exactly it is, but if it would have had a descriptive link, that would have been helpful. So I'm taking this and I'm taking that and I'm going to highlight my text, right click, link, and I'm going to place that link in there. And now when they would pull up that link, it would tell them exactly what it is that it's taking me to. Likewise for definition of terms, I'm going to X out of here, X that, and then insert it, right click, link, paste. Definition of terms. So some other examples of things that, how you can make things more accessible. You may see links on sites that say click here or more information. Those are not user friendly. If someone pulled up all the links on a page and they all said click here or more information, that's not descriptive. So you really understand the power of having a descriptive link. This helps everybody. This also helps, people be able to scan a page a lot easier and just look at those quick descriptions and go, yep, there's what I want, versus reading a URL and maybe not knowing whether that's really what I want, but maybe I should just click through it. And, it's a time saver, and it helps with cognitive, it helps with, a lot of different abilities. So definitely keep that in mind. Maybe some exceptions to the rule that I can think of. It's pretty customary and okay if, like the root of your site. Let's say your website is at.mo.gov. Visit us at at.mo.gov. Those kind of links are a little more acceptable. They're short, they're brief, they're taking you to the homepage. But where it gets, more difficult is when you have a URL that's not very descriptive, it's very long, and those are kind of some exceptions. And then there could also be, even more of an exception if you have something that you were not going to present as a electronic document and only as a print version, passing it out at a conference, that would also make sense to have those URLs listed on the page. But if there's a chance that they're going to have access to it in electronic format, use this method. All right, moving on. Now we're going to get into alternative text and examples of descriptions of what that might look like. Okay, I'm going to kind of start at the top. I incorporated, and I just realized I need to update this document. Missouri AT has a new logo. So in this case, a lot of times when we're talking about what alt text looks like, we also talk about context. So immediately you might think, well, this alt text would be a Missouri Assistive Technology. But you also have to think about the context of the way that it's being used. We've already identified at the beginning of this document that it has to do with Missouri Assistive Technology. We're identifying it in the header one. So how do I create alt text, and what exactly does that mean? Alt text just creates an alternative text version of what's going on in that image, and how it's being used, or it might be decorative, and we'll talk about that. So I'm going to right click on the image and do view alt text, which this is an example of things looking a little different from earlier versions of the Microsoft Office tools. They actually directly call it alt text. So in this case, I do have Missouri Assistive Technology in here. However, quite honestly, since it's more of a visual thing, we could mark this decorative. So either way would have worked. I'm leaning towards just making it decorative. And what that means is if an assistive tech device is scanning the contents of this document, it just skips over it because it's not meaningful to understanding the content within that image. Scrolling down. And then I want to also mention something. You'll notice I put the logo in what we call the header and footer of the document. And you can set up something to repeat on all of the pages, and that's what that is doing there. It's used for page numbers or document name, etc. If you place images in your header or footer, it's automatically what we call artifacted when it's moved to a PDF version. And when I say artifacted, it's being treated, quote, like a decorative image. So in that case, it will automatically do that for you when and again, it'll kind of skip over it, as the document's being scanned and read out loud by any sort of device. So now I'm moving on to an image that is more complex. And complex images, you have to give a little bit more thought to what that alternative text is going to look like. So we're looking at this, and kind of your rule is if you can't summarize in a sentence or two, not an extremely long sentence or two, what's going on in the image, that means you need to have an alternative version. And it's like, what does that mean? So as we scroll down here, we'll notice we actually created a data table underneath it that shares the same information that's going on in this image. So this is kind of our alternative text. Now that doesn't mean, we wouldn't set something in here. So I've clicked on the image and I view alt text, and I'm gonna. So I am going to give school-age students with disabilities 23. Something to this effect. And I'll read what I did for my alt text. So I provided the heading, school-age students with disabilities, and maybe I'll spell it right. See data table below for alternative version. Something to that effect, just communicating to them that there is an alternative version of the information in this. Sometimes you may include the information. Sometimes you may provide a link to another document with more information. You know, there's not a certain way that you have to do this. You just have to think about it and know that you need to incorporate a way to communicate an alternative way of explaining this information. So in this case, we used a data table below it to explain what's going on in that data table. So there, okay, one more example here. I have an image down on our page 3, and it says apply for services. So this image, we count this as more of like decorative. We call this a decorative image. It's not conveying anything. You don't need to understand it to, you know, you don't have to understand what's going on in the image in order to understand the information going on this page. So I'm clicking this, and I'm going to mark this as decorative. Now, if this image had been set up where it was also a link, for example, we would want to have that. We would want some context for what that image is telling us. You know, if you can click on this and also click the apply for services link, and you would make that apply for services. Again, an example of where context is important. You know, if you made that a link, the alt text wouldn't be image pressing a button. It would be apply for services because I'm linking to something that I'm applying for services. So again, you kind of get that. You get that context. And then down here, I went ahead and added kind of the same thing here. We have something complex going on. I've created a data table underneath it to communicate what's going on, because it would be really difficult to summarize this so that someone gets equal information to what's going on. Right. So kind of related. So we're kind of in the area of talking about images, and something that's related to images and, you know, text for that matter is color contrast and use of color. So we have situations where we incorporate images that are conveying information, that are, you know, a chart is conveying information. You have text on images, etc. And you need to check those for accessibility, for the contrast aspect of it, so that people with visual differences can understand what's going on. Low vision, color blindness, different things like that. So let's see here. And okay, so we have this going on, and I'm going to show you some examples here. And actually, I've got one up here as well. And I'm gonna show another tool that I use for testing, and we can send this out. It's called the Color Contrast Analyzer, and you have to hit a certain threshold for contrast in text and foreground and background, you know, anywhere that you're conveying information using color. And this is a free tool. It's a downloadable tool. The convenience of it is that you can check things that are not on the web, a image you're creating in Photoshop, a document you're creating in Word. So you can just pop up, and it's basically measuring the foreground and background, and you use.
Lainie?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. You may need to toggle on and off to that in the share screen.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it. So it's not showing that. Okay. So, okay, let me go ahead and do that. Yep, you're right. And I'll toggle. So this is what it looks like. You have a little eyedropper where you can select colors, and then another eyedropper for your foreground and background. And then it gives you feedback down here on whether the color is passing or not. And then there are thresholds for what is considered regular text and large text. And then I won't go into great detail about it, but if you expand this, it'll describe to you what the difference is between regular size text and large text. And for purposes of 508, state standard, we need to be following that AA. AAA is nice to have, but it's not required. And then there's also a non-text contrast. And what I mean by that, examples would be like the lines in a chart, things like that, that's conveying information, is just not text. So that is how that works. And basically you can just kind of go back and forth, and I'm going to just kind of show a few things here. You'll notice that I changed this foreground color to a blue that was in that pie chart, and suddenly we're not getting passing colors. And I can use this eyedropper and just, so I picked one of the darker blues and it's passing okay. So you have to consider these things whenever you're creating. And I want to go back to a color that's not passing. And here's an orange and a white. And something really nice about it is that there's an option here called lightness, and you can mess around with this. And like the pie chart, I would consider that a regular text size. So I can actually mess around with this until I get a pass, and then I get a passing grade for my regular text, which it's reflected here. I can grab this color and incorporate it into my pie chart. Maybe I did it in Excel, etc. And depending upon how you generate your colors, you can do some toggling here. Some of you are familiar with maybe like RGB, and it'll give you that feedback on what those numbers look like. And a lot of times you're able to use what we call that hex color. So that's pretty helpful. It can actually help you generate some colors that are accessible. So a really nice tool to check images, pie charts. One thing I will mention is that with like logos are an exception. So you actually don't have to pass. Is it good practice as maybe you're creating new logos to keep accessibility and color contrast in mind? I agree, but logos are basically kind of grandfathered in, and if the color contrast doesn't pass, it's technically not a violation. Okay. And I'm going to reshare. Going back here. So there's the chart I'm talking about. You know, for example, this blue passed. Several of these colors probably were not going to pass, and we would want to adjust the colors in there. And likewise, you can go in and test your colors in a chart here. So related to this particular image, something else that you have to think about is color use. And so we're conveying information here by the use of color. So these colors are, tagged here. We have lines, and then we have representation. But someone with a color blindness issue may not be able to really make any distinctions between some of these colors, or someone with low vision. So they're not really sure, the vivid blue and the cool blue. I can't really tell the difference, so I'm not really sure which line that is. So what are some other things you can do to make this accessible but you can still use the color? And that is, you can create lines, for example. You can use patterning in your lines. And in Excel, you can utilize some of this stuff. So you can take each one of these lines, and one of them is patterned in a dot fashion. One of them is dashed lines. You know, you can kind of visualize this. One of them you may do, it may be alternating, dots and dashes. So it kind of creates, it may be little small diamonds or stars. And then our legend would just not be the color representation. It would show one as a circle, one as a dash, one as a star, one as a diamond, for example. And you can leverage this stuff. It's available in charting tools and charting and graphing tools. And that's just another example. And likewise, these kind of pie charts, you can also incorporate patterning in these. You could have created, something with hashed crosshatches, dot patterning, etc. All of that is available to you. So things to think about there. And here's another example. I had this is like a little footnote for this table, and it's technically not passing that color contrast that I'm talking about. So I'm highlighting it, and I'm just gonna, take it, maybe just go ahead and take it back to a black. And we're noticing here, oh, and this is a good time to look. We've rectified a lot of our errors now. They're disappearing as we're fixing. So that warning flag is now gone, and it was flagging this little footer area here. And so we fix that. So, text needs to, follow those color contrasts, just plain text on the page. And then one of the final ones I wanted to discuss was tables, and the fact that we need like table headers. So I'm going to go down on page 3. I had this service snapshot, and I'm going to just highlight this table and select it. And when you highlight a table up in your bar up here, your ribbon bar, suddenly you have this thing called table design. And something that you want to make sure that it indicates a header row. And so what that means is that this row is identifying the information that's underneath it, and it will announce it as an assisted device navigates through that table. So it'll say impact amount 6336, service, individuals received assistive technology education and training. Otherwise, if you don't identify that, it will simply start top left, read to the bottom, and you may not have any context of, well, what exactly are, what is this information? What are these numbers? What does it mean? And so those headers give you information. And then I'm going to go ahead and just kind of apply a little styling to it. Give it some give it a little bit of shading. And I'm just going in to the table properties and going under borders and shading. And I just highlighted the first row. And I'm applying some shading to that top row to kind of just delineate it from the rest of the table. And it kind of gives it. And I thought I would just show here real quick. There's a table directly above the service snapshot one that is explaining the color contrast statistics. I'm going to highlight that table and I'm going to go to table design. And this one is what we call it has a header row and a header column. So when you do it that way, it will announce that this is contrast ratio on white, Princeton orange. It will announce both of these when announcing the number 3, for example. I want to make a stop here just for a second and just talk about, sometimes you can create really complex tables that have, that can get really complex and maybe have multiple levels and things like that. And those are the kind of tables that you can't really make accessible in Word, and you're going to have to remediate those in PDF, which is kind of a little more advanced skill. So sometimes if you realize that you've just got an overly complex table with like headings and subheadings and different things going on, you might just want to relook at that table and simplify it, and maybe it's really two tables, and then separate them and simplify them. So making a table that has column headers and row headers is easy to fix in this case. Getting more complex than that will require additional changes. In addition, if you know that you're going to be working backwards compatible with other versions of Microsoft Word other than 365, and you just kind of know your environment, there's another feature that you would want to look at, and that's repeat as header row at the top of each. And let me back up. I right-click Table Properties. I went to Row, and there's an option, Allow Rows to Break Across, and then the Repeat as Header Row. We want to set that. Now, if when working in 365, your whole organization has gone to it, you don't really have to worry about this setting, and that the one that we set up under table design is sufficient. So we have no accessibility issues. We've kind of rectified all those. And then I'm going to talk briefly about how you save and export. And I'm doing a file, save as, and then there is an option called save as PDF. You can export it that way. And then I do file, save as Adobe, and then it's just asking to do a save there. So we'll went ahead and did that there, and it's opening my Adobe Acrobat. Okay, I'm gonna go back. Okay, so the way that you want it, and then if you have Acrobat Professional running, you can do Acrobat Create PDF. That's another way. Avoid using file print. File, print, Adobe PDF. All that structure that you put in, the headings, the alt text, the links, all of that, it will strip all of it out, convert it, and then it will be all for nothing. So don't use file print. So if you ever discover that you have a document that doesn't have any tagging, this was most likely the reason. It was done in a file print fashion. So, okay, and I know we're short on time here. I'm gonna jump back to my presentation. Just a second. All right. Can you see my presentation okay?
Yes, it's visible. Thanks.
All right. So just I want to jump back to my presentation and just kind of quickly discuss what the checker can check, the accessibility checker, and what it can't check. So it can find whether you set alternative text, whether headers are in your data tables, if an image is in line with the text. And that has to do with if you ever have like an image where you set it in line where the text wraps around it, that'll generate an error. Text and background have sufficient contrast, that's set as a warning. If you create tables and you split and merge cells, that's another thing to kind of shy away from, because it can kind of create issues when, so kind of design those table, kind of know how many cells and rows and columns you need. Document is uses heading styles. That comes up as a tip. So what it can't check and what are more manual. Images with text that have sufficient contrast. It can check just plain text on the page against the background, but if you have text within an image, it can't check that. It doesn't know whether the alt text is accurate. Another thing that you want to avoid is like using that automatically generating alt text. I would avoid doing that because it'll just automatically generate it. It'll look like it's passing, but the alt text might be inaccurate. Complex images have an alternative version like we did with the data table. Making sure that your title is set under the info option. Heading levels are in sequential order, something I didn't mention earlier, that you don't skip heading levels. You go from a heading 1 to a heading 3, for example. That can be kind of confusing to assistive tech devices. And if lists are formatted correctly, my example was just showing, I had a list that was just prefixed with asterisk, and that's not the proper way. So going through and kind of manually checking that stuff. And this is just a quick, will I need to review my PDF documents? A quick check in like a tool like Adobe Acrobat would be good. But if you've done your due diligence with what we've discussed here, it's probably going to be accessible and it probably won't show any errors. But like what I mentioned, if you have complex data tables, there's some other little things that might pop up that may require remediation. And we have other trainings on Missouri AT. And this just talks about other ways that PDFs are generated through like a third party, or if you're scanning a document, you have to make sure that you scan it with optical character recognition. And we've got some presentations that go over that as well on the AT site. And here are some resources, and that we kind of mentioned. And I know we're running long on time. I apologize for that. And that covers it. I know we're right at time. If anybody has a few more minutes, we can cover if we had any questions on the chat, or if you want to drop anything in the chat right now. And I'm kind of just reviewing. And some of it had to do with me not sharing my screen. So does anybody, oh, and the color contrast checker, thank you, Eileen, for dropping that in there. I appreciate that. All right. Okay. And I know we're just a minute over time, but I appreciate you guys joining us today, and hopefully you can, this little one page quick guide will be, a helpful little addition, because it's just something that you can print off or look at, and it kind of gives you a nice summary of everything